1 year and 13 days ago, to be precise, I married my best friend. Not really. Actually, my best friend is my sister, and that would be gross and I think illegal. But I did marry the love of my life, and the day after the wedding, we left for a 2-week honeymoon. Planning the honeymoon was almost as important as planning the wedding. You only get one, so it has to be perfect. For our first trip together as husband and wife, we wanted adventure without the danger, romance without the expense, and sex without... Okay, we just wanted sex. We figured Europe would be good for the not dangerous part, and for romance, what could be more romantic than the two of us alone together in a country where no one speaks English? So we chose Germany and Austria. Traveling the romantic road, how perfect is that? Now prepare yourselves, you're about to hear something that no one has ever said before. We had a great wedding. And after the reception, we spent our wedding night in a hotel, and as tired as I was, we did need to take care of some business, if you know what I'm saying. We had to open all our presents and write down what everyone got us. It was really not that exciting. The next morning, I felt like crap, almost like I had the flu. Now, we hadn't gotten much sleep, if you know what I'm saying. I was still, just imagine, no, don't, never mind. I was still coming down from the high of being a princess for the day, and we were scrambling to get ready for our trip, so for a little while I just chalked it up to exhaustion. But eventually, I started to realize I had a situation on my hands. As the hours went by, my sick feeling took on some familiar characteristics. By the time I self-diagnosed, there was only an hour before Bart's folks were going to come to pick us up to leave for the airport, so I had to act fast. I called my doctor's office, and they were able to send a prescription for antibiotics to the pharmacy. I finished packing, Bart's folks arrived, Bart still had to finish packing, so I ran out to get my prescription, and I said, "I'll be right back." Now, the pharmacy was only 2 miles away, so I really thought I'd be right back, but I'd never been there before, and when I walked in, the pharmacist said, "Oh, you weren't in our system, so I couldn't run the prescription. It'll be another 20 minutes. Shit? I said, "Okay, well, I need to leave right now to catch a plane to go on my honeymoon, so if there's anything you can do." She smirked at me. I think it's because she knew what my prescription was for, and then she said, "I'll let you know when it's ready." What she knew and what I had realized is that I had a UTI, a urinary tract infection, and she might have been smirking because you generally get UTIs from having sex, and maybe she, like me, has the sense of humor of an 8th grader. Or maybe she, like me, was imagining 2 people alone on their honeymoon and one of them with a UTI. You see, UTIs make it very, very uncomfortable. Down there. 15 minutes later, she called me over, I grabbed the drugs and ran. In the car, I gobbled one down. I wanted to start getting better as soon as possible. I was not in good shape for travel. With a UTI, for the lucky few who've never had one, you have to pee constantly. You go to the bathroom, stand up, zip your pants, and think, I have to pee again, urgently. However, every time you pee, it hurts like a mofo. Think hot pinchers on your privates. And then there's the chills and the fever just to round it all off. By the time we piled into Bart's folks' car, I was a feverish mess. His parents didn't know I was sick, so Bart just kept whispering to me in the back seat, "Are you okay?" And I kept shaking and saying, "No, not really." When we got to the airport, we didn't have a lot of time. We grabbed our boarding passes, checked our bags, got through security, and had to run to the gate, which was not fun. But Bart carried my bag, so I just had to keep up with them. When we got to the gate, The doors hadn't even opened, so we had time to look at our boarding passes, and that's when we realized we weren't seated together. Bart was physically holding me up at this point, and the idea of spending 7 hours on a plane with a stranger on our honeymoon was not at all appealing. We went up to the always dependably pleasant flight attendants, and since I looked more pathetic, Bart let me do the talking. I said, we're on our honeymoon and we would love to be able to sit together. The guy said, you should have checked in sooner. The lady said, the flight's fully booked, there's no available seats. And then she seemed to have a change of heart and added, listen, you two hang behind when we're boarding and we'll see if there's anyone willing to switch. So we waited and waited until pretty much everyone was on the plane, and then we went to board, only that nice lady was nowhere to be found. So I went to my seat and Bart went to his, 14 rows away. I was seated next to the cutest little girl, maybe 6 years old, who was resting her head on her father's shoulder in a sleepy repose. When I sat down, the little angel gave me the dirtiest look, like I was the devil, and then she proceeded to kick me repeatedly in the hip and the thigh. I turned to her and she glared back at me with this look that just said, yeah, what are you gonna do about it? I almost started to cry right there, but then I heard the most beautiful words I had heard since the day before's I do's. The stewardess called out, where's my honeymooners? I shot up so fast you'd think I'd sat on a tack. There was a guy willing to switch. I sat down next to my husband, grabbed his arm, and did not let go until about 2 minutes later when I had to go pee. But the important thing is we got to fly to Europe on our honeymoon together. When we landed in Frankfurt, finally, I was still sick, but I was so excited to get out there and start our adventure in the wild unknown. We drove into town for lunch, and when we got there, Bart said, you know what? We're in Frankfurt. We should have Frankfurters. Brilliant. We found a restaurant, sat down, and attempted to speak German to the waitress. Now, neither of us had formally studied German, but we had listened to Talk Now German on the plane ride over, so had at least 6 hours under our belt. This was our first interaction with a real German, so we wanted to speak the native language. Bart said, hallo. Zwei für das Mittagessen, bitte. The waitress eyed us both suspiciously and said, 2 menus in English. Obviously, she did not know what she was dealing with us. Bart said, Nein, Dankeschön, and Deutsch, bitte. That showed her. Now, what we came to realize over the next 2 weeks is that not only does everyone in Germany and Austria speak perfect English, they really don't like it when you speak crappy German. And they would refuse to speak German to us. So our attempts at immersion fully squashed, we tried to be polite by not just assuming everyone knew English. So at every hotel, restaurant, beer garden we went to, we'd always start off by asking, "Sprechen Sie English?" Which invariably everyone would take offense at and reply, "Ja, of course." Our German menus in hand, the entire menu, half of the menu was Frankfurters. And even though we didn't know what was on any of them because we didn't read German, we were in Frankfurter heaven. I ordered one, Bart ordered one, and we waited. Now, what we didn't know yet was that by adding an ER to the end of the name of a city, you make whatever you're describing with that from that city. So, for example, a Wiener Wurst is a sausage from Vienna. Our plates of food arrived, and neither one remotely resembled a hot dog. Bart had some boiled eggs covered in green sauce, and I had a large pink slab of pig. But as much as our meal didn't quite meet our expectations, we just laughed about it and dug in, and it turned out to be pretty good. And we ended up eating a ton of frankfurters and wieners over the next 12 days, even if that's not what they were called. And maybe our honeymoon wasn't the most adventurous or, let's face it, sex-filled trip. We got to explore a foreign place together. And did we, despite everything, have the most romantic and perfect honeymoon ever? Yeah, of course.